exceptional.
Travel plans to Arizona are being set, and we're going to tell you which of the Reds arriving in Goodyear for spring training will have a big bounce back year in 2023. We're going to tell you all about that and take your comments and questions on today's live Aloha Friday edition of Locked On Reds. Let's go.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Reds with myself, Jeff Carr, and my co-host, Stephen Offenbaker. We are lifelong Cincinnati Reds fans that have turned an addiction into information for you. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to us talk some Reds with you. We encourage you, if you're listening, hit us up on Twitter, but I know that you are watching right now as we are live on this Aloha Friday edition, so make sure you jump in the comments section, hit us up with your questions and with your thoughts about the Cincinnati Reds, because talking Reds is what we do, and we want to talk Reds with you. Locked On Reds is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day, and today I want to start by asking you a question. What are you feeling about your favorite team, the Cincinnati Reds? Because we are nearing pitchers and catchers reporting, and with that, lots of feelings are coming out, whether the news is good or bad. People seem to be loving or hating, a lot of hate going around for our Cincinnati Reds, and some of it is warranted, but there's plenty of storylines that we want to get into. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about the guys bouncing back from injury and maybe a couple of bad performances. We're also going to talk about the young prospects who have a shot to make the team, and maybe a rumor that I'm starting to see swirl up a little bit here, Steve. But before we get into all of that, I want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more by going to FanDuel.com/lockedon. And with the Super Bowl coming up, you've got the $3,000 no sweat bet. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. And Steve, where we're starting today is the bounce back bets. The guys who have been here for X amount of years. It's funny to think of like Jonathan India and Tyler Stephenson being the grizzled vets on the team, but outside of Joey Votto, that kind of are. And that's just where this roster stands. But just about everybody who isn't a rookie or a sophomore is bouncing back from some kind of injury or maybe some lackluster performances.
And it's funny, you mentioned Joey Votto, and that's where I'm going to start, because when we're talking about guys that need to have a bounce back year in 2023, it's Joseph Daniel Votto, coming off of what we learned is a multi-year injury that he's been playing through. And he's still had periods of spectacular baseball during that injury. Now, it wasn't always consistent, and it wasn't for long stretches of time, but when he was on and showed that he could still be the guy. So my hope is a fully repaired and rehabbed Joey Votto comes into 2023 and is just an absolute pitching staff wrecker for the Reds. And just, I'm not expecting MVP Joey Votto. I think that might be just too big of an ask. But, you and I have talked about pretty much since his injury was announced, and pretty much since we were told he was going to be done for the year last year, that we thought he was going to be the comeback player of the year this year. And I still stand by that. Even though we're not quite sure if he's going to start on opening day or not, it's going to be earlier in the season than, say, May, unless something goes dramatically wrong between now and then. Taking that into account, I think that Joey Votto will have the comeback player of the year award in his pocket at the end of the season. And that really, I think, for the purposes of this segment, Jeff, makes him the first guy that I wanted to mention.
Absolutely, Steven. And the biggest reason that you and I keep saying this is, think about this. The reported injury that he had surgery to repair, which was his rotator cuff, and then they found out that he had really messed up his bicep as well because he's been trying to overcompensate for a torn rotator cuff for about 5 years, because they said the injury happened. Actually, no, math is hard. It happened in 2015. It's more than 5 years. But that, yeah, I know it's like 6, 7, something like that. I don't know. It's a number between 1 and 100. But I do know this: the performances that he put up in 2016 and 2017 show me that then that's when the shoulder was still very, veritably healthy, and he could actually work with it. And then you see 2018 and 2019, the decline phase, as we called those years, and then the huge bounce back there at the end of halfway through 2020 and then 2021, the way that he was able to get that power back. I think with this surgery and with it cleaned up and all this other stuff, we are going to see more so the 2021 form than the 2018-2019 form. And I know that everybody said, oh, well, time is undefeated. I still think that this is going to be a just revved up locomotive version of Joseph Daniel Votto once he hits the field.
Yeah, and I've learned along the way, Jeff, and I know you have too, that to never underestimate Joey Votto. And you talk about, he came back up before falling back off, and it was a little streaky. I think, he finally admitted the injury was too bad to play through. There was too much going on. They went and did the work. I think that when we saw that decline again after he got really good for a while, I think that's when the bicep damage occurred. He was hitting home runs. He was playing well. He was, changing his swing, adapting, compensating for the shoulder. And I think that's when he wrecked the bicep and he just couldn't push forward anymore. And I think that's what happened with him. But, he's not the only guy in this Reds lineup that could be eligible for comeback player of the year. He's not the only guy that's going to need to have a big 2023, a big bounce back year for the Reds. And I think the next guy that needs to be having a bounce back year and that could compete for comeback player of the year is a guy that's been on the show this offseason, and that's Tyler Stephenson, coming back to play all of the positions, it sounds like. Thank you, David Bell, for finally listening. Make sure you click, David, the subscribe and the notification bell so that you don't miss any of our takes, David.
Yeah, absolutely. The article that was in the Inquirer talking to David Bell about how, yes, we won 140 to 150 games, so we're going to get him some games there at first base, some games at DH. That sounds familiar.
I feel like I wasn't appropriately quoted in that article. I'm just saying.
Yes. Source Stephen Offenbaker was first with this. No, yeah. That's how we've been talking about this offseason for Tyler Stephenson, and that was our number one stated goal. We knew that they weren't going to go out and sign some big name guys and just completely reshape this roster with big money free agents. What they needed to do was to take pressure off Tyler Stephenson in order for him to get 150 games, that he had to catch 150 games. He doesn't have to do that now. They have a good stable of catchers. We still need to come up with this catcher's room that with Kurt Casale and Luke Maile, that he is going to be able to play 140 to 150 games, and he might only have to catch 100. And I know when he was on with us, he said he wanted to catch about 120. I still think that might be a little bit too much, and I like the idea of being able to move him around a lot. So I'm expecting huge things, because there's a lot of folks out there that they're like, yeah, Tyler Stephenson seems good, but like he's got durability issues. And I'm like, does he though? Does he? It's 1 year. Like, I think we're going to see a different Tyler Stephenson this season.
Oh, I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with that. I think if he is able to play in 140 games, we could see him hit 40 home runs plus. He could go over that total. He's going to be an absolute masher if he's healthy and in the lineup. So I think that that's the direction he's going. And I was really happy to see that article. You know, I take my little shots at I think they're listening, and I do think they're listening, but I was glad to see them saying some things publicly that in past years they may have been coy about and just been like, well, we're going to see how it shakes out. We're going to put the best lineup out there. We're going to no, they're like, we're going to get Tyler Stephenson into 140, 150
Very
games.
poignant. Yes.
I'm like, all right, well, now we're doing something. So, you know, I appreciate them coming just straight out with the information. I love it.
Yeah. I think that in and of itself gives me, and it's funny because, you know, the Athletic gave off-season grades and things like that, and they gave the Reds a C+. I think that the Reds deserve a B-. I don't think that they deserve a very, very good grade, but I think that they deserve a little bit more than a C. I think that they did some important things like that. They didn't improve the bullpen. They didn't improve the rotation or anything like that, but they improved Tyler Stephenson's standing because he is going to be an important player, not just this year, but for years to come for this ball club.
Well, listen, Jeff, there's one more guy that we need to get to when we're talking about guys that could have big bounce back year, a guy that we think you can bet on in 2023. And before we get to him, we're going to talk about him coming up here in the next segment. But before we get to him, I want to talk about a sponsor of our podcast today. We are so excited this year. We have added FanDuel as a sponsor of the podcast. This year, the only app that you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sportsbook in America. FanDuel, that's right, is rated the #1 sportsbook in America. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Download FanDuel now so you can bet Super Bowl 57 with a no sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. This has been made for Jeff Carr. He can take the over all day long. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to the point spreads to who will score a touchdown to the over under, as we like to joke about around here. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. And best of all, you get paid your winnings instantly. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockedon to claim your no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Hey, and now that sports betting is legal in Ohio, Locked On has the perfect show to help new and seasoned gamblers get their bets right. You can download and subscribe to the Locked On Bets daily podcast. They have daily picks and analysis. It's available wherever you get your podcasts, just like Locked On Reds. All right, Jeff, let's dive back into this talk of guys we're expecting to have comeback years, because we did miss one guy, and we didn't miss him. We just ran out of time. And that is the one and only Jonathan India, who I think is definitely a candidate to have a much better 2023 than he had a 2022.
Exactly. And again, this is a health related thing. And he played as much as he possibly could throughout the year, trying to play through those injuries, really showing his leadership and his loyalty to the team, which I think a lot of people tend to overlook, including us. We were talking at the end of the year, shut him down. But now I understand why he did what he did. He didn't want to come out of the game, and he was showing that he deserves to be in a leadership role. But also the way that he played, a lot of people said, you know, defensively, he needs to move off second base. A lot of folks wonder if he should be a leadoff hitter. A lot of folks were wondering if his rookie year was a total aberration and we're not going to see that again. I think all of that's wrong. I think that he is a fine second baseman. I don't think he's a good second baseman defensively, but I think he's a fine second baseman defensively. And I think that we're going to see that because he dealt with that hamstring issue pretty much the entire year. I don't think it was ever 100% healthy after he injured it initially back in May. And then, of course, all the stuff that he had ever, you know, with the Field of Dreams game, the compartment syndrome that we talked about a whole bunch and things like that. Like, it just seemed like one thing after another, not necessarily because of this one injury. He kept re-injuring that one thing, but it was just like he got hit with so many pitches. I look at this and I say, he's 100%. He's 100% motivated, as we've seen on Twitter here recently. So he's going to come out and he's absolutely going to mash. I think that Jonathan India, like, I know, okay, everybody's like, oh my gosh, Jeff and Steve think that everybody coming back from injury is just going to be absolutely amazing and the Reds are going to go to the playoffs. No, but I think that Jonathan India is going to be better than people are talking about right now.
Well, no, absolutely. Because if you notice, we're not talking about any of the pitchers. I have giant question marks surrounding every single pitcher coming off of injury. So that's why we're not talking about them today. They're not going to have these giant bounce back years, at least not where I can just go all in on them. But what I know about Jonathan India is this: if he is healthy and remains healthy for a season, there's absolutely no way he's not better than last year. Listen, folks, last year he was a negative 0.4 WAR on the year. That's not going to happen again if he's healthy. A lot of that stems from the injuries. Now, I blame Jonathan India for some of that, for trying to power through the hamstring stuff when we all knew, and I told you it was a terrible idea for him to try and do things like that, yet here we are. And then the compartment syndrome thing was something else that he tried to battle through. And, you know, I guess credit to him for trying to play and to be involved with the team. And then my blame shifts from him to the Reds, where sometimes you got to protect these players from themselves. And I think the Reds failed to do that. So all of those things combined for a Jonathan India that is not, he is not a negative 0.4 WAR guy. That is not an accurate representation of the player that he is. And he's not going to be that guy in 2023. If he's healthy, even if he's nicked a little bit, it was a perfect storm of injuries that resulted in him being terrible for a lot. Now, here's where I'm going to disagree with you, Jeff. He is not an okay second baseman. He's slightly below average. He needs to move off that position, especially since we know there are a lot of guys in this organization that can play the position defensively better than him. Now, that's not a knock on Jonathan India. It's just the way it is. I'm not saying the Reds should bench him. I'm not saying the Reds should trade him. I'm saying the Reds have to put their players in the best positions to put the best possible team on the field. To do that in Cincinnati, it means Jonathan India is the DH or he's an outfielder and somebody else is playing on the infield.
And I think if he's playing in the outfield, I think it's left field. I don't think he's got the arm for right field, and I don't think he's got the range for center field. So I think you put him in left field because, I mean, it's easy to put anybody in left field if Adam Dunn played there. So I think that it's easy
Jesse
to think
Winker,
of Jonathan India.
Tyler Stephenson played in left field.
Yeah, I think it didn't. Max Schrock played a little bit of left field, but hey,
yes, he did.
We'll put some respect on Max Schrock's name. But no, when I think of Jonathan India anywhere else, I think left field is probably the spot because there are so many infielders that are coming up through this system that could easily fill in. I mean, you think of Matt McClain, if he's not going to stick in center field, he could definitely play second base. We know that for sure. So I think that would make the most sense. The one thing that I give a lot of grief to, because I've seen a couple of whispers, and I don't even want to call them rumors, but I've seen whispers of people talking about trading him. And I know that is like one of those alternate reality type ideas that we've thought of this offseason, but I'm seriously putting it into an alternate reality type deal because I don't think the Reds are even considering this idea right now. I think a lot of people are looking at it and saying, well, he had a bad year last year, let's trade him again, and follows along that faulty line of thinking that, okay, he sucks, let's get rid of him, which, by the way, he didn't suck. But I'm just saying, like, everybody always has this thing like, oh, he's bad, let's trade him. Like, okay, you're going to trade him at a low point in his value? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
And, that's the thing that drives me crazy the most online is when someone's like, oh, man, I don't know. Let's use Joey as an example. Oh, Joey's terrible. He's old. He costs a lot of money. He's not the guy he was. He walks too much. We need to trade him. I'm like, well, if everything you just said about him is true, who is it that you think is taking on that $25 million contract? I mean, really, Can you break down a deal for me? Get on the trade, app and tell me who are we getting back? I think that
like you're trying to sell a car to somebody. It's like it's missing 2 wheels and the engine fell out last week, but I'm going to ask $10K for it.
Yeah, we're gonna give you a good deal. Yeah, it's terrible. Yeah. It drives me bonkers, Jeff. But listen, we ate into a whole nother segment with this bounce back talk, but there was a couple other things you wanted to try and get to. We've got a couple minutes left in this segment. What did you want to try and get to?
Yeah, real quick, because we've been talking a lot about Elly De La Cruz. We mentioned yesterday 2 guys who have the most to prove in spring training, and we talked about Elly De La Cruz and Brandon Williamson. Wanted to kind of say, like, looking beyond Elly De La Cruz, because there's not just going to be one call-up this year. There's going to be a lot of call-ups because this is once again going to be a year where the Reds try to figure out where their roster is as they move into 2024, because I believe that's when they start to say, okay, this is where we have holes. This is how we can fill them. So with that, with their performances in spring training, and one of the reasons that I titled this the way that I did, this spring training is so important, not just for the bounce back guys to get ready, but also for these young guys to make a case for themselves. Who is the most likely dude, not named Elly De La Cruz, to improve his stock in spring training to the point he either could make an opening day appearance on the roster or an early season appearance on the roster?
Two names for you. I'll do a position player and a pitcher. I know we're short on time with this, but for me, it's Matt McLain. You talked about him just a second ago. He could force this issue with Jonathan India if he has a great spring and take over second base. He can suddenly find himself being a center fielder and push Nick Senzel. I think Matt McLain has the biggest chance to be a huge surprise wild card if he can get it together and cut down that strikeout rate and still show some power out in Goodyear. The other guy for me as a pitcher, it's Levi Stout. I think that Brandon Williamson is going to need somebody to push him for that number 5 starting position. I think Levi Stout is a name that we've been seeing as another pitcher that's just this close to really storming into the conversation. And, you know, the writing is on the wall, folks. A rookie is probably going to be the number 5 starter coming out of spring training. So I think it's up to those two guys, unless another dude just really comes screaming onto the scene that's a little bit more ready than we think. I think Levi Stout has the best chance to play disruptor to Brandon Williamson's plans.
I think I agree with you on Levi Stout, especially, and I agree with your take about a rookie being the 5th starter, because I think the strongest form of the Reds bullpen includes Luis Cessa and Connor Overton. I don't think those guys make the rotation. So with that being said, position wise, I like Matt McLain, but I'm also looking at, and I just lost the name. Christian Encarnacion Strand. My mind had 13 names going through. Christian Encarnacion Strand, for me, showed the power, showed the numbers. In fact, and shout out to a friend of the podcast, Crazy, because he is one to point these things out to me. But if you look at his numbers, his hitting statistics side by side with Elly De La Cruz, they are comparable for the minors last season. And he is a guy that has pretty solid plate discipline, very good power hitter. I mean, if he goes off in spring training, does he earn an opening day stop? Probably not, but he probably earns a May call up, definitely by Memorial Day, because I think that he is the kind of guy that the Reds could transform a lineup with. You put him in the 5th or the 6th spot and say, go out there and mash, dude, because you're going to be behind Tyler Stephenson and you're going to be in front of some other guys where they're just like, yeah, okay, we're just going to throw this dude pitches and see what happens. Because I think that his power could play up to the point that he could get a spot on this roster.
All right, and we were doing great on time, and now you've made me want to ask a question on that take. So we're going to run over on this segment now. Sorry. Where are you playing him? So does it matter if Votto is back versus Votto is not back for him to have an opportunity? Or if you think he's good enough, do you think the Reds just take him and figure it out? I mean, and if they do that, where do you play him?
I think it's one of those where he's going to force his way onto the roster and they're going to be like, okay, let's see how we can fit him into the lineup. And obviously his 2 defensive positions right now look like first base and DH. And I know that Doug Gray has mentioned that his fielding gets a lot of flack, and he's not necessarily sure why, because he's a bit more average than people are giving him credit for. Like, they're acting like he's like Pablo Sandoval out there or something. He's not Pablo Sandoval. So maybe he's got a shot to play a little bit of third base as well. But I think this is a scenario. We always talk about David Bell. Let's get the lineup right, and then we'll figure out where everybody plays. I think he is a perfect dude for that scenario.
All right. Well, time's going to tell on some of these dudes. I think that the names we've thrown out there are all reasonable candidates, Jeff. And I'm just excited to see which ones of them deliver. And we've only got to wait, 11 more days before people start arriving at the Goodyear baseball complex to get this show rolling.
Yeah. And that's something too. Like, I know that with the World Baseball Classic, there's a lot of teams out there that's going to have some key players that won't be playing in spring training games come March. That ain't going to be a problem for the Reds, because the Reds are trying to play a bunch of prospects, and a lot of very important prospects at that. Spring training is going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to be all over it here on the Locked On Reds podcast. But you know what we're all over? we're all over questions and comments because those are coming up next. Before we get to those, though, I want to let you know you can follow us in between episodes on Twitter. You can follow me at Jeff Carr with 3 Fs. You can follow Steve at S. Offenbaker with 2 Fs. You can follow the show at Locked On Reds. Also, make sure that if this is your first time checking us out here on YouTube, thank you so much for watching us and looking at our beautiful faces. Well, mine and Steve's. Yeah. But make sure you click that subscribe button and you click the bell to get notified whenever we've got new content for you, because like we said, as spring training gets closer, whenever pitchers and catchers report, we are going to be back to 5 days a week. Right now we're in our truncated offseason schedule, but that's coming up here soon. We are going to split back to 5 days a week. And as games get going as well, we're going to have even more content for you too. So make sure that you have that bell clicked so that you get notified when we got some content for you. All right, Steve, I know we've got questions. I know we've got thoughts.
Let's do it. And, for the audio only listeners, we're going to do some of these and then we'll wrap it up and we'll get you the bonus Friday edition with the rest of the Q&A. For the YouTube folks, when you hear us do the audio wrap, stay right here because we're going to keep plowing right on through all of your questions and comments. Take as many as we can and we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about within reason, poofy haired fancy boy. I'm talking to you. We're going to get to all of that stuff. And Jeff talks about his pretty face on YouTube, and he's absolutely right. People stumble onto the show all the time, and they think they found an episode of Parks and Rec where like Andy Dwyer has started a podcast. So there you are. All right, let's do this. Quirky Picker wanted to make sure everybody knew he was the first one here today. Thanks, Chad, for being here. We appreciate you. Bo is asking how everybody's doing today in the comments. Bo, we are doing fine and looking forward to talking some Reds baseball. Mark checks in talking about opening day tickets going on sale, Jeff. Just a few days away from opening day tickets becoming available. I know you and I just had a conversation about this because I'm coming to town, folks. We are going to be taking Great American Ballpark by storm. So make sure if you see Jeff and I out there that first week, stop us, say hello. Let us know you're a listener or a viewer. We'd love hearing from you guys. Sometimes people say, oh, yeah, we saw you here or there and didn't want to bother you. No, come talk to us. Listen, if you can distract me from whatever it is I'm supposed to be doing to talk baseball, you're doing a great job. So come say hi.
And like I always say, we love talking Reds and we want to talk Reds with you. So like if you see us out there in the wild, come hit us up. But also with opening day, I just got the word because I'm part season ticket holder with a group of folks, and we got the word that our ticket allotment is coming in. So I'm getting excited. Opening day is coming soon.
Greg checked in and he thinks Tyler or Joey could be the comeback player of the year. We touched on that. And Greg, I think you're absolutely right. I think either one of those guys could be in line to receive that award because either one of them are going to have improvement upon last season if they're healthy. Just by default, it's going to happen. So I think either one of them could be in the conversation.
The award itself is kind of subjective in its terms, and it's kind of hard to predict. So I don't necessarily know that FanDuel is going to have a line for that, but I would definitely be in on it if they did have a line on that, because I don't think that, at least in the baseball world, like outside of Cincinnati, I don't think Joey or Tyler would be favored, but I definitely think they should be.
This next one is a good question, and I'm not going to put it up on the screen because it's a family show. But the question is, do we think Joey Votto will play at least 140 games? I think that's probably a bit much. I always see him coming in between 120 and 135 max. If he were playing 140 games, I'd be shocked. I think just at this point with his age, they're going to rest him a little bit more than that. I think we may see him drift closer, not a straight platoon, but more platoon situations. I think, especially if the goal is to get Tyler Stephenson 140 games or more. Those games have to come from somewhere if Tyler's playing other positions. So some of those games are going to come from Joey Votto.
And I think too, it's always hard to predict injury, but what we know of Joey Votto is every so often he just catches a pitch off a thumb and he misses like a week or two. And I think that's reasonable to expect from him at this point. And I think that 140 games, I think he plays 140 games, he's definitely winning comeback player of the year, but I think it's probably closer to 120.
Yeah, I think we're both in agreement on that. Hey, Mark loves my shirt. I love the shirt. If I can find more cheesy Aloha Red shirts. I'm gonna get them into the closet over there because they're great.
I think Tommy Bahama has one that's like $150, and I'm very tempted to go grab.
They sell one at the team shop down by the Hall of Fame, Jeff. It's about $100.
I think
it's about $100. I think it's a Ren Spooner. I don't think it's a Tommy Bahama, but maybe it is a Tommy Bahama. I'm not sure. Mark also says that he's with us on the Votto take. 120 games tops. I think that's probably a way to go with that. All right, for the audio feed, let's wrap up on this one, Jeff. RJ is asking who's one or a few of your Dragons players to watch this year?
Definitely early this season. I've heard a lot of encouraging reports about guys who are going to end up in Dayton, and I'm looking forward to going and seeing some of them because there's been reports that Chase Petty will be in Dayton. There's reports that I think Cam Collier is going to be in Dayton. Maybe later on in the season for him. I think starting off the year, Chase Petty is going to be in Dayton. I think Edwin Arroyo is also going to start the season in Dayton as well. So you're talking about some dudes that aren't necessarily going to be called up in the next 2 years, but they're going to be huge pieces of the next wave. So we're like in that first wave. When we get to the second wave of prospects, Chase Petty, Edwin Arroyo, Cam Collier are going to be at the top of that list. And I mean, there's some different guys, whether you're talking about MLB.com, Kylie McDaniel, or Keith Law with The Athletic or something like that. They love Cam Collier. So the moment that he steps foot in Dayton, I'm going to be up there as much as I can. It's going to be another year of a lot of excitement. I think that their roster was very stacked at the beginning of last season because Elly De La Cruz, and you had Jose Torres, and you had Reese Hines, and you had Joe Boyle, and you had Connor Phillips and all those guys, but there's another way. We're just going to see what the second wave of talent looks like this season in Dayton.
Have you heard any speculation as to what they're going to do with the catchers? Are Bayuhin and Nelson moving up, or one of those guys be down there in Dayton to start the year?
I think we might see Nelson in Dayton. I think Bayuhin is either going to be AA or AAA. But it's just Nelson has had it rough at the plate over these last year and a half or so. So I think that they're still going to try to work with him about the way that he approaches each at bat. But I think that we probably see him begin the year there in Dayton. Or there's the other guy, and I can never remember his name. It's a catcher named Tanner. He's actually higher rated than both Nelson or Bayuhin, but I think he might be in Dayton as well. So there's definitely going to be lots to watch when you're talking about the Dayton Dragons this year.
All right. For the audio feed listeners, video guys, YouTube folks, stick around. We're going to keep right on going. But for the audio feed, we're going to wrap that right here. And then we'll be back in your feed a little bit later today with a bonus episode that has the rest of the Q&A. But for this episode, for the audio feed, that's going to wrap up this edition of Locked on Reds. Next week, we'll continue to get you ready for spring training. We'll be talking about the storylines, the rumors, and the transactions as we lead up to that February 14th start of camp for the Cincinnati Reds. Now that you made Locked on Reds your first listen, go make Locked on MLB Prospects your second listen. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going to give you all of the information on the Major League Baseball stars of tomorrow. It's the Locked on MLB Prospects podcast, just like Locked on Reds, and it's free and available on all podcasting platforms. Until next time for the audio folks, we're going to be back in your feeds, keeping you locked on Reds every single day. All right, let's keep this party going, Jeffrey, because there's still lots and lots and lots of comments and questions. So,
and while you're,
here we go. Yeah, I got it. I've got one. No, I know sometimes I'm like a little slow on the click, but if Joey Votto does have an MVP-like season, and what if he wins it? How do they not pick up his option in 2024? There's a lot of interesting what ifs surrounding Joey Votto and his option for 2024. But I will tell you this, if he wins the MVP, they're probably not going to have a choice. They're going to have to do it. Anything short of that, though, I don't see them picking up this option. Now, I'm not completely, down on the idea that somewhere along the way, if Votto's having a good year, that they may work some kind of renegotiation where they don't pick up that option, but they decline it and he signs a new contract. I can see deals being worked out. A deal that pays Votto more than the buyout, but less than what he would make on the option, and keep him in Cincinnati and not have to go through the PR nightmare that would be involved in Joey signing someplace else. But I don't see them picking up the option in any other scenario than this, that he wins the MVP.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. And if he's having an MVP level season, how many games is just Phil Castellini and Bob Castellini going to be sitting up there in the owner's suite, just like downing as much bourbon as they possibly can? Like, seriously, you're going to win the MVP of the year that we have to decide whether or not we're going to pick up another $20 million on your contract? Like, I would love that for Joey, and I would love that as a Reds fan, because it's just like, yes, it's what they deserve. But for a fact for the season, they're going to be sitting there watching him and just being like, oh my gosh, we were trying to figure out how we were going to keep him on the cheap. No, we can't. Because if he wins the MVP, you're not turning down that option.
I can't wait to get your take on this next one, Jeff. Chad, the quirky picker, says, often when a player struggles for a long period of time and then comes out and says that they were injured the whole time and playing through it, he says it just sounds like a lame excuse. Well, if you're talking about Joey, then he would have had to fake a total reconstruction of his shoulder and bicep. So if you're thinking conspiracy theory, it wasn't a real injury, I don't think that's true. So that tells me the injury is real. I think with Jonathan India, same story. He was hurt. He had to be life flighted to a hospital from Field of Dreams game. Yeah, that injury was real. So in both of these cases, I think there's no, these were real injuries. And I guarantee you a shoulder and bicep injury that Votto had to have rebuilt definitely contributed to the downtrend in his performance.
And I think for the most part, because this is about one or two people, or one or three people, really. It's either Joey or India or Tyler Stephenson. And I think in all three cases, that was absolutely true. I don't see any scenario in which Jonathan India was trying to make an excuse for his performance. Like they were reporting, I know that David Bell was reporting at the winter meetings that Jonathan India was already working at that point to get ready for the season. And in David Bell's words, quoting Jonathan India, he says, I'm going to have a better year than my rookie of the year season. So like, he's not, there's no lame excuses here. Like, that's a lame excuse that I make when I play a pickup game of basketball, and let's be honest, when I play golf, I do a lot more of that than I play pickup basketball. Like, oh man, just, back's real tight. That was a rough swing right there. I'll play through it. I'll be all right. It's like, that's a lame.
BR7 says that Tyler Stephenson is one of the top 10 catchers in Major League Baseball. I mean, I think we all agree with that. I think I saw something from MLB in the last couple of days that actually had him listed as the 10th best catcher in Major League Baseball. That might be a show topic somewhere before spring training, is where some of these guys actually rank within the rest of baseball, Jeff.
I think that he is going to prove, because I think that that's conservative. I think he's a top 5 catcher if he's healthy, because I think that the catcher position as a whole is kind of light on talent. And I think that if he is healthy and he plays a whole year and he plays as well as we think he can, people are going to be like, okay, this dude is a stud, and he's going to show it.
Debbie Brown checks in. Hey, Debbie. She says she saw an interview with Tyler last night. He's in Arizona already. I think a bunch of the guys are out there. There's a couple things going on in Arizona right now. One of them being the Super Bowl. Damn Chiefs. There's a couple other events as well. So I know that getting into housing, getting into, Airbnbs, getting into Arizona has been a challenge for a lot of people. And I think a lot of guys went early to be able to secure their places and lock things down. So there's that. And then I think Tyler is pretty notably early the last several years. So, he's the head of that catcher room group position. So it's good that he's out there to work with the pitchers.
Yeah, I'm still going to find a good one for that. I think that people like to talk about, ownership not trying and not putting money into the team, and so they're just going to keep losing games. But we discount the fact that these players took 100 losses personally. Like, they ended the season and they're like, this is not the reason that we became professional ball players. We didn't come here to collect a check and not do anything. And so I think that they ended the season other than the physical obstacles which they had of like different injuries and things like that, I think their mind was just like, no, we want to fix this. We want to play some more. So I think that there's been some guys that have been out there, especially those that are coming back from injury, like Tyler, who've probably been in Arizona for a couple of weeks now.
Poofy haired fancy boy checks in. Jeff, he wants the blackouts to be lifted. And you and I talked about this week on an episode, and I've gotten a lot of questions in the DMs and in the comment section of that episode, asking when all this is going to happen. So, Poofy haired fancy boy, we are ready for the blackouts to be lifted as well. It's not going to be this season, folks. I really don't think so. What's going to happen is this bankruptcy filing is coming. It will happen sometime this year. It's going to have to play through bankruptcy court. All of the things are going to have to happen. So talking to the broadcast team, they're all preparing business as usual, not doing anything different than they normally do. I suspect whatever changes we see would be for the 2024 baseball season, as far as new streaming options, no blackouts, those kind of things.
I think I don't necessarily have an alternate take from that, but I am encouraged by a couple of different things. Like Forbes was reporting that the Bally's is going to look to do the restructuring after the NBA playoffs. So about May, June, somewhere about there. So when that happens, it's likely that they will say, okay, we're going to keep it business as usual for the rest of the season or the rest of the year, and then we're going to figure it out, because I don't think they can switch it mid-season like that into something streaming, but I know that it's coming. Major League Baseball is prepared for this. That's why they hired Billy Chambers as the director of local media, and they hired him from Sinclair. So he's done the job that he's already in before, just for running Bally. So I think that overall, this is the kind of thing that's going to happen sooner rather than later. I think there's a small chance it could happen the second half of the season, but it's not going to happen anytime before June.
Greg checks in and says that he thinks Stephenson is the long-term replacement for Votto, and he said that when Stephenson was drafted, he's too tall to play catcher forever. There's a lot there. Okay, I don't think that Stephenson right now is the long-term plan at first base. I think ultimately, if he can't catch anymore and they're just going to stick him somewhere full-time, it'll be DH at some point to keep that bat healthy and in the lineup. I think that CES has a much better chance of being the long-term replacement for Joey Votto at first base.
I would agree with that. And I think that, there's definitely still going to be the ability for him to move into first base if need be, like maybe CES needs an off day or somebody needs an off day. And they probably will keep him as, at least on like a depth chart, as like a backup catcher. So he can still get behind the plate every so often. And we know from talking to him, he loves catching. This isn't like a situation where he himself is looking forward to getting out from behind the plate. He fancies himself a catcher. So this is going to be something that when they ask him about what he wants to do, I think, sure, he's going to go along with the plan of mixing in other positions and really trying to keep his bat in the lineup every day. But at the end of the day, he's a catcher.
BR7 trying to help with some names for this catcher's room. He's got Catcher's Cave. Holy crap, Batman, let's get back to the Catcher's Cave, he says. No, Catcher's Nest. Keep trying, guys. We can do better than this. Come on. If the Reds are in the hunt for the playoffs this year at the deadline, should they be active in the trade market to help their chances, or just stick with the current plan and roster? Oh my goodness. Listen, I have said they could be the outside cusp of the final wild card spot. They should trade away absolutely nothing to secure the final wild card spot. They should continue to build. If there's a deal with somebody that's more of a contender where they could make some kind of a trade and package a dude and get somebody, maybe, but just to trade to be competitive for the final wild card, I'm gonna be a no on that, Jeff.
I think, and it was the most frustrating thing in the world, even for, an outsider's perspective for the Orioles fans. But last year, the Orioles were the most frustrating team at the trade deadline because they had clear needs. And instead of addressing those needs, they traded away their closer and they traded away their first baseman, their best hitter. And everybody was just like, what the heck? And they still remained in the playoff race up until the very end, even with those trades. But the Orioles looked at it and they said, this is fun, but we don't see this as our window. Our window opens next year. I think in the Reds case, if we are talking about that kind of an awesome thing, which is, it's a bit of a bummer to say because we want them to be in a playoff position. But if they are in a playoff position at the trade deadline, any move they make needs to be done with the lens of we're looking at next year, not necessarily looking at this year. Like, and this is an example. I'm talking about the on-field example of this trade, but whenever the Reds went and they traded for Trevor Bauer, they didn't trade for Trevor Bauer for 2019. They traded for him for 2020. So I think that that's what the move would be if they are to make a move at the deadline. But I would think that the chances of them being a buyer at the deadline, given everything that has to happen and and given the plans for the future and stuff like that, the chances are greater than zero, but I think less than one.
And, Jim comes with something that we see a lot. And, I want to dig into this for just a second. He's like, playoffs with this team? No way, sadly. Listen, if I had to put money on it, I agree with you, Jim. They're not going to make the playoffs this year. But I don't think they're going to be as bad as everybody thinks they're going to be. There's a lot of room for growth over last season, and there's a lot of wild cards at play now that we're not quite sure how it's going to impact everything. We don't know how the shift is going to, and the ban of the shift is going to result in player performance. We're not sure what that looks like. We're not sure what the changes to the bases and maybe the increased running game is going to look like, because that will benefit the Reds in a couple cases. There are some guys that can steal bases if that's something they decide they're going to commit to and do. And that's something baseball is looking for. So I could see it happening in Cincinnati. This team won 62 games last year, Jeff, with more injuries than the team's ever had in the history of baseball, and using more players than they've ever used in the history of baseball. And all of those things, I just can't see them being replicated. It can't be that bad again. The Reds fired their training staff. They brought in new people on the medical side of things. They're going to be healthier. Now, I'm not saying they're not going to be hurt at times. That's going to happen. It's a 162 game season. There will be injuries, but there will not be injuries to the extent that there were last year. All of those things look to make, just by default, the Reds win more than 62 games. Now, there are some equalizers. It's a different kind of schedule this year. Rather than being division heavy, everybody is playing everyone. So the Reds will play some more good teams. So that can have an impact. But, Jeff, you've come down at 75. I don't know that that's exactly realistic, but the final results of my poll from Twitter with the 65.5 over under, 65%. I'm not making that up. 65% of the voters took the over 65. So there is some optimism out there about the number of wins that this team can put together. And again, I'm not being like, you're going to the playoffs. It's not what I'm saying. But I don't think they lose 100 games in 2023.
Yeah, Jim definitely has a point. I think you have to hit the 99th percentile outcome for every single player on this roster. And you also include the fact that Elly De La Cruz comes up and lights the world on fire, almost more so than we're thinking he might. You might have a couple of key call-ups of pitchers that absolutely hit, like every one of them. Everything has to hit. All of the question marks have to be answered with a resounding yes in order for the Reds to make the playoffs. But you don't have to have all of those things go right to be a better team. There are so many people out there that are predicting this team, and we still have it, and I still have it up here. I think it's just more so for motivation for you and me, but that weird power ranking thing that they came out with, like a month or two ago, where they said, hey, the Reds are going to lose the most games in the history of their franchise this year. That's not happening. It's just not. They're better, and they're healthier. They're going to win. Like, I keep saying 75, and I know that people say that that's way, way too optimistic, but is it really that far-fetched to think that this team could win 66, 67 games? They'd hit the over if they did.
Absolutely. And listen, a lot of people agree with this take, Jeff. I'm just going to blow through a few of these. Poofy-haired fancy boy says, he thinks the Reds are going to surprise a lot of people this year. Austin saying he doubts they make the playoffs, but anything can happen. Mark says in our division, anything is possible. This is true. I mean, let's not get carried away with what the rest of this division looks like. There's been some improvement, but it's not the Mets. And then Austin comes back with this, Jeff. I don't see why the Reds couldn't be this year's Orioles, especially since we have better pitching than they did. This is a pretty good take. I think this is a really good comparison of what the Reds could do in 2023 if a lot of the ifs work out, if a lot of those things that you just mentioned actually happen in 2023.
And I think it's important too, like even just thinking about the comparison between the Orioles from last year and the Reds this year, is that much of baseball outside of Cincinnati is looking at the Reds roster and going, who? Let me ask you this, Steve. Outside of Trey Mancini, what Baltimore Orioles player could you name from last year?
Cionel Perez.
That's right. He was on there. And he pitched really well.
He pitched really good.
Cionel Perez. Oh my gosh. What a
Bet you didn't think we were going to get him in the show today.
Hey, look at that. We fit him in there. I mean, heck, we fit Willie Green in an episode last week. Their possibilities are endless.
Poofy has come back with, do we think the Reds will be better than the Cubs and the Pirates? Where I think it's probably a whole show coming, right? We got a whole show coming on this at some point.
You definitely have division previews coming, but I think hot take out of that, because it's very easy to say, yes, the Reds will be better than Pirates. I think it's going to be easier to be better than the Cubs than the Pirates this year. I think the Pirates
kind of agree with that. I think the Pirates are going to be surprisingly good. They've done some things. And listen, they haven't made very many splash moves. They did the move that we thought the Reds should do, bringing back a former player so they could at least have a press conference with McCutchen. But beyond that,
and they did the other move that we thought we should do is and get the veteran presence in the rotation. Although Rich Hill's about 712 years old, but still they got the veteran presence.
But they did it. Yeah. So they didn't make splash moves, but they're going to be a little bit better. And with their young talent, I'm just saying this division is,
it's winnable.
One, not as bad as everybody thinks it is. And two, I think the take that in this division, anything can happen is the correct take. I think that there's not really a class of the division. I mean, you may say St. Louis, but I think they've got their own problems. And if the money situation is what it really looks like it's going to be, with them coming up with the biggest impact of losing the regional sports revenue, they may look to move some guys and clear a contract or two. So
they did not go big this year like everybody
they
thought.
Did not. So I would say, never say never as far as where the Reds could finish in this division in 2023.
When I think especially like the Cardinals are not deep. I mean, they are a Paul Goldschmidt injury away from their lineup being pedestrian.
Jim, I feel like you're Jim. I know where you're coming from, and I get you and I'm with you in a lot of regards. This team has beat you up. I can tell this team has beat a lot of us up. And, this comment from Jim: the Cubs, Pirates, Cards, and Brewers made deals to get quality MLB players to help them. The Reds traded for prospects and have not addressed the bullpen. Okay, well, I mean, everybody did make moves. The Reds did not really address the bullpen, because I think they're going to address the bullpen from within, and guys that were starters last year are going to be added to the bullpen along with the guys coming back from injury. There's a lot of quality arms coming back from injury. So that's just addition by subtraction of the guys that should have never been in the major leagues last year. So is the Reds bullpen as bad as it was last year? I don't think so. Is it stellar? Is it lights out? Do we really know exactly what we're going to get? No, none of those things are true. So I get where you're coming from, Jim, but I'm just open your heart to the possibility that this team might be a little bit better than you think.
I definitely agree. And there's a thought that I also have about the Milwaukee Brewers, Steve. And let me start it by asking you a question. How did the Reds handle the situation with Luis Castillo and his contract?
They handled it poorly. They didn't address it when they should have. And as a result, Crawl made a good trade, but I think there was an opportunity. They could have actually kept him around if they had done it early and been aggressive.
The Milwaukee Brewers were not paying attention because they are doing the exact same thing with Corbin Burnes. Corbin Burnes wants to stay in Milwaukee. They have not offered him a contract yet. In fact, I think they went to arbitration with him. They didn't even like do a 1-year deal to avoid arbitration. So they are coming into a time, because yes, you look at that rotation, you say, okay, you've got Burns, Woodruff, and Peralta. That team's not going to be bad as long as those three guys are there. But if around the deadline this year they trade Corbin Burns, the Brewers could in fact be one of those teams in the hodgepodge with the Reds, Pirates, and Cubs as to what are they going to be? Are they going to be a 70-win team? Are they going to be a 65-win team? Are they going to be a 75-win team? Are they going to be an 80-win team? There's so many questions, and I don't think the Reds fit into an 80-win team, but there's so many questions about the teams that are ahead of the Reds that are not named the Cardinals, that this division, it's going to be competitive looking because everybody's going to finish very close to each other. It's not going to be a situation where you've got one team that is just super far out of it. And you're also going to have teams that you expect to be good that are not going to be that good. And I think the Brewers are the prime candidate for that.
Seth Pryor checks in and says that he had Spencer Steer penciled in as the opening day third baseman, but now he is most likely to start at first base. And it's question mark. I don't know that that's true.
He's hurt, maybe.
Well, maybe. And, you know, as we've talked about today, Jeff, there are a couple guys that could make a case to fight their way onto this roster. And then that changes everything. I guess if we have to look at it through the lens of no surprise promotions of prospects, rolling with the roster that we think they're going to have, if Joey's healthy, he's the first baseman. If he's not, then maybe you probably have a little bit more flexibility of guys that can play third base, and you shift Spencer Steer over there, who has seen some time there as recently as last season. So I could see that. I'll say this, Spencer Steer, I really do think he's going to become a full-time player without a dedicated position. He is going to be that super utility that we've been saying they've needed for a while. I think he plays 6 days a week, but he plays at 6 different spots, nearly maybe 5 different positions to get his full-time at bats. And I'm okay with that. I think he, you know, when I sat down with him, you know, he said he likes moving around. He enjoys playing the different spots. And, you know, he is definitely a guy that just wants to be on the field, and he doesn't really care where that is. So, you know, I like guys like that. And I think he's very useful. And I think it's a great addition to this roster to have him be that guy that just moves around and kind of gives everybody a day off and plays all of the positions fairly well.
And he's a talented player as well. I think it was either MLB Pipeline or ESPN. I'm blanking on which of the two, but it was one of the two that had him in the just missed being a top 100 prospect list, like the guys who were just on the outside looking in, because they understand like he's got that kind of talent. And you're right, that is his. I think the ultimate plan for Spencer Steer is to be that first guy off the bench / can start anywhere to give someone else a day off. And at the end of the day, I think that we were liking him at third base based on how this roster is shaping out. But as spring training has shown us, there's going to be injuries and there's going to be some changes to what we expect here in January. So there's a possibility he plays somewhere else. I definitely see that happening, and I'm not bothered by that.
Well, we've reached the point in the show where I think Jeff is going to offend a whole country, but let's see how this plays out, because Valentine checks in from France and says, thank you guys for all of the stuff and making the Reds lovable all around the world. Are you going to do a French accent, Jeff? Are you going to do it?
I don't have a French accent, although it's funny because
I'm so glad. I thought for sure we were going to lose a whole country.
My wife can speak a little bit of French. I cannot. So I'm not even going to try. But thank you for checking in. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I love it. We've got guys worldwide following the Red Legs, Jeff. I love it.
People are hungry for this team, even if it's outside of Cincinnati. They're hungry for this team. Just waiting. And we've talked about that before. That is what the Reds are asking us to do. They're just asking us to wait because they don't want to spend the money that we would like them to spend. So you either spend money or you spend time, and they're spending time.
Bo Dreisen checks in and asks about Austin Hendrick. How's he coming along? Just curious if we know how his progress is going. Well, he was out on tour, Jeff. He was on the Caravan, wasn't he? So I guess that says something about.
And it's telling in a lot of different ways that when you look at top prospect lists, and I'm not even talking about top 100, I'm talking about organizational rankings. Like he keeps falling down that list, man. Like he has trouble staying healthy for one, and when he is healthy, he has little to no plate discipline. So
yeah, he's having some serious strike zone problems.
yeah, that's a profile that's not going to grow very well. So I really hope that he can turn it around here. And maybe he's a late bloomer. Maybe he's not a guy that, works quickly through the system. But as it stands right now, he's kind of off the radar and off of the, we talk about waves and, we've got our first wave going on. We got our second wave coming up. I don't know where he fits in any of that.
I'm going to throw this up. Jim's asking about the trading of a prospect for an outfielder. We did hear that from Nick Krall earlier in the offseason, and we haven't heard a whole lot about it since then. Jim's speculating about a deal with Arroyo. I think it would take a lot for them to move Arroyo. I don't know that at this point they're going to go do a big splash deal packaging prospects for an outfielder. I think we've got the outfield we're going to open with. We talked about that earlier this week, Jeff. I suspect that, that was an idea that was being floated around. That was a conversation starter amongst the general managers, but I think that's probably a situation where that ship has sailed already.
Well, and I think too that, remember the reports on the Luis Castillo trade were that the Mariners and the Reds actually started talking about that like a year ahead of time. And so I think that Nick Krall is the kind of guy that when he starts a negotiation, he kind of slow plays it a little bit. So I think that there's probably still, plans and they're still working on a possible prospect for prospect deal. The only thing is, if I look at that trade, I actually look at that through the Dodgers lens and I say I'm not doing it because Pages is ready to come up now. And I think that they kind of need some outfield help. They didn't go get anybody this offseason. I mean, I think they got JD Martinez, but JD Martinez is a DH. Like they definitely still need outfield depth. And if anybody gets hurt, Pages is going to be the first guy that gets called up and gets into the lineup. So I think that move, and while Edwin Arroyo is a very tantalizing prospect, and yes, the Reds do value him very highly, and so does everybody else. He's up on everybody's top 100 prospect list. So there's that. But also, I just think that the Dodgers overall wouldn't really like to do that trade.
I'm going to take a little side trip here, Jeff, just because I'm the one controlling the clicker. Seth says college baseball season is less than 3 weeks away. If you're looking for a baseball fix while you're waiting for the Major League Baseball regular season to get started, check out some college baseball. And if you're wondering how to do that, ESPN Plus, it's one of my favorite streamers out there. They have lots of stuff between the hockey and the college baseball, lots of live stuff. But college baseball, a lot of it on ESPN Plus. And a lot of University of Hawaii baseball for that late night crowd out there. It is so much fun watching baseball. There was a time, Jeff, when before like the SEC baseball stadiums expanded, before they built more professional sized stadiums in college baseball, there was a time when the University of Hawaii led the country in attendance for multiple years because there's not a lot of baseball out here and people come out to the stadium in Manoa and watch this baseball. It is a fun product. Check it out. End of side trip. Sorry.
No. And I love me some college baseball too. Plus he has the UK logo on there. So he knows about the SEC. And I mean, we always talk about the SEC when it comes to like football and basketball, but there is no discussion when it comes to college baseball. SEC is the best. I mean, SEC might be some folks have equated it to like low A as far as the level of competition. So yeah,
there's a lot of talent. A lot of talent has come out of there. Scott Campbell is with us. Aloha, Scott Campbell. How you doing, Scott? I finally saw your video, by the way. Jeff showed it to me. Nice work, Scott Campbell, in talking with Nick Krall. Asking him to come on the show. A letter is in the mail, guys, to the Reds front office. We're gonna invite Nick. I know, right? We are inviting Nick Krall onto the show. We'll see what he does. But he's getting an official invite to come on and talk to you guys about Reds baseball. So we'll see what happens with that. We're trying our best. We're doing what we can. Whatever this name, what is this? Whatever. I'm going to say it right. He says, how's it going, guys? He found out about the show from his dad, and he's been listening for a few weeks now since he showed, hey, the next generations of Reds fans coming on board. I love it. We appreciate you being here. This is my favorite show of the week, guys, talking with you all. Love
picture looks like Simon Cowell.
It does, right? I don't know. These YouTube usernames are great. I gotta tell you what.
Yeah.
Jim's asking about ticket prices. Did they go down trying to bring fans back? No, not really. They didn't go down. I just bought a bunch of seats for while I'm in town for opening week.
You know what you do with that though, Jim, is you got to check out like Game Time, SeatGeek. There's a couple of different apps that base ticket prices off of demand, and especially close to first pitch, you're going to see those ticket prices be pretty cheap. And then what you do is you buy a, view level or outer view level or bleacher ticket or something like that. And then you go stand at the handlebar and you have yourself a good time, because there's been many a times that I buy a cheap bow tie. Gosh, I always flip those two. Bow tie bar. But you buy yourself the cheapest ticket, and then midway through the game, you spot out the sections that are pretty empty, and the ushers are just kind of, doing whatever.
Why are you giving away all of our secrets? What are you doing?
Oh, come on. There's not going to be enough people that run down to the stadium and take over. So that's not going to. I'm just trying to tell everybody here watching that's how you do it. And we're not going to, that plan's not going to get killed.
We don't ever do that. What? God, Jeff. Jesus, I need to be able to mute your mic. Oh my God. If you're wondering about that, if you're wondering about that bow tie bar view, I actually posted a picture on Twitter of that today. If you just scroll back like 2 or 3 posts in my feed right now, you'll see my favorite spot in Great American Ballpark. I go to that spot and watch part of a game pretty much every single time I'm in the stadium. I love it down there. I really do. It's a great spot.
We're less than 60 days away. I'm not
serious question. Why won't any of the Reds brass come on the show? Well, I'll listen, to be honest, we have not extended an official invite to any big names within the Reds front office until now. We are inviting Nick Krall onto the show. Not sure what's going to happen with that. We're going directly to him in an attempt to have him come on. We're more than happy to talk to anybody from Castellini's on down within the Reds front office about what's going on with this team. And I know that, I have a couple running jokes and, Jeff plays along with those things, but we're definitely willing to sit down and do a serious interview with any of these guys to get them on and give them the ability to talk directly to you folks. So, we'll do whatever it takes to make that happen. If we have to agree to questions ahead of time, if we have to, spell the whole thing out, we'll do whatever it takes. So, and I have communicated that to the Reds front office. So we'll see what happens, guys. I mean, anything is possible. I think Nick Krall has done a better job this offseason with his media relations. I think he's been working on that a little bit. So maybe he will come do a podcast or two around Reds country, and maybe we'll be one of them. So we are definitely trying to make that happen for you guys.
Yeah, it's definitely on us, not necessarily on any of them, just because we haven't extended the invitation just yet. We weren't really sure how they view us, but I think that they view us well.
Maybe. I'm still kind of scrolling here, Jeff. Sorry. Going. Sorry, guys.
I will say this while you're looking there. I'll circle back on something. We talked about Dayton a little bit earlier, and I cannot stress enough how much fun it is to go to a Dragons game, but also there's this great little spot. And if you're inside Dayton, you're probably just like, yeah, you're telling me something that I already know. But if you live outside of Dayton and you go to a Dragons game, there's a spot a couple of blocks from the ballpark called the Century. And if you like yourself some bourbon, there is no better place in Southwest Ohio to go get you some bourbon, because the Century is awesome. They have just about everything you can think of, and they got great prices too. So go to a Dragons game. That's a little bit of free advertising, but I love the Century. I can't wait to get
should we talk about our bar tabs from the last time you and I were there together?
No.
We found the high-end stuff, folks. Let me tell you. We wandered into every one of those things. It was so good. Mr. Juan checks in and asks, how confident are we that Graham Ashcraft can match his rookie year? His low strikeout and high ground ball rate make me worry that the shift ban will hurt him. This is a pretty good question.
Yeah, it's not something we've really touched on a whole lot, because we talk about the shift ban and how it's going to help hitters. But yeah, a guy like Graham Ashcraft, whose mantra is get in and out of the inning as quick as you possibly can by pitching to contact, making hitters get themselves out. It's going to be interesting to see how that does affect him, because you're right. I mean, he's not a strikeout guy, and that's not been his MO as he's gone up through the minor leagues. Like it's not like he got to the major leagues and all of a sudden stopped striking people out. His the way that he pitches, and I love the way that he pitches because it's so different from Nick Lodolo and Hunter Green. But I do wonder how that shift's going to play out, because the BABIP's a big thing with him. And if he's got a lot of BABIP, it's going to be tough.
Listen, I will say this, and I'm not one to speculate on if players can remain healthy or not. We just hope that they all do. But, I've had conversations with people close to the Reds organization that are a little concerned about Ashcraft's ability to remain healthy for an entire year. And that stems from, if you recall, Graham Ashcraft really wasn't on a lot of people's radars. And then all of the sudden he was. And that coincided from working with Kyle Bodie and basically becoming a max effort, max spin kind of guy. And that pitching philosophy has shown to have tremendous success, but also puts a lot of wear and tear on the pitcher that's doing it. So my hope is that he is engaged in a great offseason workout program, got himself strong, got himself ready, and that he can sustain that max effort for an entire Major League Baseball season. But we saw last year, he ran out of gas, and the Reds, I think, did him a disservice by bringing him back. And I know at the end of the year, there was really nobody else to pitch, and that's why they did it. But I think they did a disservice by not just shutting him down when he was clearly done for the year and just letting him work on his offseason and get ready to go. So I think this is a great question. And I think there is some concern to what Graham Ashcraft can do over the course of an entire year and not run out of innings before we reach the end of the season.
And I'd be curious too, to see just how he develops this season, if he is able to pitch at 85%, 80% sometimes, like, especially when there's nobody on base. I know that was a big thing that, Chris Welsh and Jeff Brantley have been talking on the broadcast, is that this idea that you can go out every single pitch and just throw it and go as hard as you possibly can and do that over 100 times. That's why you see so many pitchers only throwing 4.5, 5 innings when they start. And that's why you see some people saying, well, we need to amend the rule on pitcher wins and things like that, which that's a different discussion. But that's where that stems from, is that there are so many pitchers now that have trained that way. And I think that it's going to be important to see how that idea kind of circles back a little bit, because everything's circular, right? I mean, we see different things happen, and then the converse happens, and we kind of reset a little bit. How is pitching going to reset? Because the idea of just throwing everything you possibly have in your first inning pitches, your second inning pitches, your third inning pitches, your fourth inning pitches, whether there's guys on base, whether the bases are loaded, it's just not feasible. That's not going to give you a long career.
All right, Jeff, we're coming to the finish line here. Let's try and work our way through a few more of these really quick. Poofy wants to know about your hat. Where'd you get that fedora, Jeff?
It's on a website called Coolie Bar. I'm going to see if it's, Coolie Bar. That's how you spell it.
That's your golf hat, right?
It's my golf hat. It's got like the whole UPF thing, keeps the sun off me, all that good stuff.
BR7 says that BR7 says you should be in black and white because you look like you fell out of an Elvis movie. Don't you do Elvis impersonation? Don't.
Oh.
Don't do it.
Like half laughing through that. Almost ago.
Do you play MLB The Show, Jeff?
I do.
That's a question.
I actually haven't got the new one just yet, I don't think the new one's out, but once the new one comes out, I'll be getting it.
Chad, defending his position, says he wasn't talking about players that we know are injured. Yeah, I mean, okay, all right. I'll double down on this a little bit and just say that with the pitchers, like we were just talking about, a bunch of the injuries that occurred to the starting pitchers towards the end of the year were just innings management and them being tired. So yeah, okay. They ran out of gas, so they're hurt. They had inflamed ERAs and they had to go on the injured list. So okay, I'll give you that, Chad. I mean, that does happen.
I'm trying to think. There was I think it was more of a football thing, but oh no, I remember that now. You remember And this is a Bengals reference. Sorry for anybody that's not a Bengals fan, but do you remember Randy Bullock coming up with that hamstring injury after he missed an extra point that ended up losing the Bengals the game? It was a couple of years ago against Oakland, I think. Anyway, yeah, that's where I'm thinking, like, yeah, you got a fucking injury there because you cost the team the game by not making an extra point. So
there's a little conversation in here about MLB TV. I think there's going to be a lot of changes to MLB TV once all of this sorts out with the bankruptcies and such. But, Debbie Brown mentions that, she has an MLB subscription and she can watch all the games. The blackout games just come on after. That way you don't miss a game. That's the way I do it also, especially for day games. We talked about the Peacock game, Reds versus Yankees, that starts at like 11:30 in Cincinnati. Listen, folks, that's 5:30 in the morning here. I love the Reds, but I am not getting up at 5:30 to watch that game. I will watch it on MLB TV on delay. Another one of the questions in here about MLB TV is if the price goes up when they end blackouts. Probably. And I'll pay it if I don't have to work technology magic to watch all the West Coast games. I'll pay a little bit extra to get MLB TV.
If we get to the point, and Major League Baseball and Rob Manfred knows this, but they have to do this, because if we get to the point where you can get on MLB TV and you can literally go seamlessly between every game and you don't have to worry about blackouts and things like that, it's going to increase the popularity of the sport. I mean, it's a 1+1 deal. That's not hey, you're looking at this from a really interesting angle. It's like, no, this is straight on right there. You get rid of the blackouts, you grow the sport. End of story.
All right, we're going to take one more, folks. We're at the hour 17 almost mark here, hour 15 minutes.
Appreciate you guys
fantastic.
Joining us today.
We could, awesome. I tell you, Jeff, one day I think we're going to do just talk till we drop. I think one day, it's not today, but one day we're just going to start this thing and go until there are no more questions. I'm just kind of interested to see where we end up. We have to have order DoorDash and have some food brought in or something. But for today, we're going to take one more, and I think it's an interesting one. We're going to go to Pat, who wants to know about Stuart Fairchild. Do we think that Stuart Fairchild is underrated right now? We talked about him the other day, right? I don't think that he is, and I don't even think he's going to make this roster now with the outfield moves that they made.
You know who Stuart Fairchild is? He's Jose Siri. You remember Jose Siri? Really solid in the minor leagues, but
vaguely,
didn't really profile that much in the major leagues. He never really got that much of a shot as a Red, and they ended up they couldn't add him to the 40-man. I think he was a Rule 5 draftee for the Astros. Went to the World Series with the Astros. Played a little bit for the Rays last year. He's bounced around a little bit. There's a possibility that could happen with Stuart Fairchild. But I think at the end of the day, he's not going to make this roster, and it's not because he's underrated. I think the Reds understand that he's okay. He's all right. And I don't necessarily think that there's that much of an upside when it comes to what he could offer the Reds in the outfield.
It boils down to if they're going to carry 6 outfielders or not, and I don't think they will. And if somebody moves off of the infield to the outfield. But right now, like we talked about maybe yesterday, day before, I think if you were to look at the outfield right now and what's most likely for opening day, they're going to carry 5 guys. It's going to be a platoon of Fraley and Pinder. It's going to be a platoon of Friedel and Senzel. And then it's going to be Will Myers in right. I think that's probably the way the outfield shakes out right now. If we had to name the opening day outfield group right now, I think that's what I would go with. Now that could change if they get crazy and move India, or if Matt McClain suddenly finds himself a center fielder, or there's some caveats there. But I think that for me, if I had to pick a group right now, that's how I'd go with it.
Yeah, I think that you can make an argument between Pender and Solak, but again, we're talking about 6 1, half dozen the other here. This isn't that big of an argument, and I don't think that there's that many guys that are separating themselves in this argument currently. The opening day outfield is going to look nothing like the final game of the year outfield.
I agree, and I think that probably that's a spot to wrap it up. Jeff, go ahead and bring us home.
I like it. And thanks everybody for joining us here on this live Aloha Friday edition of the podcast. Thank you so much for your questions and your comments. We are here every Friday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time on the Locked On Reds YouTube channel. But that's going to do it for us here today. Now make sure you go check out Locked On MLB Prospects, as Lindsey Crosby has you covered on every farm system. He has gone through every single farm system in the major leagues throughout this offseason, breaking down every team succinctly and talking about the key prospects to look out for in 2023. Locked On MLB Prospects is just like Locked On Reds. It's free and available on all platforms. And as we get closer to pitchers and catchers reporting, we will expand to 5 days a week. That's going to start the week of February 13th. So make sure you stick here with us. Make sure you're subscribed. You've got the bell clicked to be notified whenever we've got new content for you. Because why, Steve?
Because we are going to keep you locked on Reds every single